Siemka, z tej strony Prosoud i witam Was w bonusowym odcinku z The Dark Pictures Anthology The Devil in Me. Tutaj w tym odcinku pokażę Wam materiały dodatkowe, które udało nam się odblokować podczas całej tej rozgrywki. Zgaszę sobie lampkę, bo ja tutaj chyba nic nie będę widzieć. To mi się bynajmniej wydaje. I słuchajcie, tutaj mamy aż 6 sekcji. Mamy tutaj na przykład takie dioramy. Nie wiem, na czym one będą polegać. Ale możliwe, że je sobie po prostu zobaczymy. Prawdopodobnie zrobimy sobie 2 lub nawet 3 odcinki z tych materiałów dodatkowych, jak zazwyczaj robiłem. No i zacznijmy sobie od wywiadu z Jessie Buckley, czyli z aktorką, która wcielała się w postać Kate w The Devil in Me oraz dała jej cały wizerunek. Tak więc sprawdźmy to sobie.
My name is Kate Wilder. I've got a master's in criminal psychology. I'm an investigative journalist and hope to make a difference.
Hey, we're here with Jessie Buckley to talk about Supermassive's brand new game in the Dark Pictures Anthology, The Devil in Me. So let's start at the beginning. Tell us a bit about the character that you play.
I play a character called Kate Wilder, who is a presenter who's part of this documentary team who are doing a show about the serial killer H.H. Holmes.
America's first serial killer confessed to 27 murders. The number grew significantly. Nearly 200 lives.
I'm a serial killer documentary watcher. Is that your jam too?
Yeah, I'll watch a serial killer documentary.
Right, it's really relaxing. Like, okay, cool,
yeah,
I can
it's
chill
kind
out.
of fascinating why we're all addicted to kind of those stories.
We need a plan. Forget his games, traps, all that bullshit. Think about the killers we've covered. There's always a weakness.
I'm not playing detective, I just want to survive.
Playing detective is how we survive.
So what interested you in the role of Kate?
Well, to be honest, I've never played a video game in my life, and I had no idea what the hell the world was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that was firstly why I kind of was like, oh yeah, that sounds
Jessie nie grała tutaj w żadną
fun.
grę wideo
And, yeah, and
nigdy
then
w
I read
życiu.
the script and talked to Alita, who's our director, and it just seemed like a really lovely thing to be part of and something new and fun. And I can't believe how they create this world.
Action.
You know, usually I just get a script and it's like 70 to 100 pages long, but there's like 300 pages in one script. It's unbelievable.
So as you kind of mentioned, the game has multiple branching paths, so your character could end up in any number of situations. What's it like to film a scene, multiple times with different endings?
What I've found is like you can only be in whatever strand you're in at that time and figure out the emotion of it at that moment, because then you can offer up something completely different when you go into a different strand. And it's a very immediate experience, which I guess is also what a player will feel when they're doing it as well. So I just kind of try and keep my head in where we are right there at that moment. And if I was trying to think of what was happening in the other strand, it would be a disaster.
It must be really hard, yeah, because you kind of have this mapping, I suppose, in your brain of what the outcomes could be, and then just trying to stay in that moment. It's very interesting stuff. So many things can happen to characters in the Dark Pictures anthologies. How do you make sure that Kate is always Kate, no matter what she's kind of faced with?
Well, I guess before we started, we did a big read-through with everybody, so it was good to kind of get a handle on who she is in the context of the environment she's in, but also the relationships that are in the world as well. It just kind of reveals itself from the script, and I just kind of let her run free and see what
That's so cool,
happens to her. Yeah, I don't think anybody has continuity in themselves. I don't anyway.
It must be very difficult. Yeah, really difficult. And that's it. I guess it's quite good fun to then go, okay, let's go with this and see where we end up.
Well, I think also Kate lives on the knife edge of she has a genuine obsession and curiosity about serial killers. So there's part of her that's kind of running towards it and part of her that's running away from it, you know, and all of them have come to be curious about H.H. Holmes, but also with that, you're kind of living a real life horror as you're going into this world.
So, come on, Charlie. What do we know about this guy?
And everybody's fantastic, like, and they're all such distinctive people, you know. And they all somehow genuinely feel like a crew, you know, like
Nice, yeah.
you kind of have the kind of riffs.
Charlie is thinking. She looks a lot like a temper tantrum.
And the new fledgling loves, and then the kind of creeping horror of your life. What are you doing with your life?
Sounds
You
very
know.
familiar. Yeah, I think I've been there at 3 a.m.
What is all of this?
Okay, so let's talk about the setting that Kate finds herself in. I've heard something about murder castles. I'd like to know more.
So the production company that Kate works for, Lonnet Entertainment, they get a mysterious call from a stranger who says that he's basically made a replica of H.H. Holmes' murder castle.
Wicked.
And invites them to come and document it because he knows that they're interested in serial killers. And Lonnet Entertainment, which is run by a character called Charlie, is kind of hard up, but only Charlie knows that. And so even though Kate is a bit kind of resistant to go because it just feels like another kind of fuddy-duddy thing, they agree to go to this island as one last kind of hurrah.
It sounds like absolutely nothing awful is going to happen. It sounds like a
No.
perfect setup.
I'm going to have a cup of tea.
Delightful. Yeah, lovely island. Very nice.
Look! Years are the wine that fill the cup of time.
So in the game, you've got quite a limited inventory. Which items would you take into the house if you could take anything?
I'd probably take, like, I think, look, all these mad people are just in need of a hug. So I'd probably take a bottle of wine and just be like, mate, let's just sit down, have a glass of wine, talk about what's going on
Get
here.
Charlie's fags. Come here.
Have
Let's
a
just
fag.
calm
Let's just calm
down.
down. That's my weapon of choice. I'd kill him with kindness.
Well, you could at least start with the wine, and if that doesn't work, you've got the bottle. So, I mean,
Exactly.
it's
It's perfect.
You're done. You're done.
And if not, I could just drink it myself and have a lovely time.
Some kind of belt with 3 or 4 of them attached. Off you go. It's all going to be fine. And if it's not fine, you're not going to know about it.
Yeah.
Done. Perfect. Good choice.
Think it's okay if we pour some wine?
God, please do.
So you've mentioned the chase scene with the other girls. Was that fun? That genuinely was fun to be running and scared and all of that?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's always fun. I mean, I think everything's kind of fun. So, thank God it's not something that happens regularly in your real life. So when you get to be part of something where it's super heightened and surprising and otherworldly things can happen, and you've got these 2 excellent kind of birds beside you who are like fighting off the demons, and you're genuinely scared and you're kind of doing it together, it's it's brilliant fun.
Move your ass! Go!
I've been around mocap. I've seen mocap. It fascinates me. What was that like? And more so, what's it going to be like to see your face in a video game?
To wear a mocap is like, I mean, you just feel like you've got a huge nose because you've got this cycling helmet on, but then it has a huge beak at the end where there's a camera. And sometimes when they're putting it on, you can see the other actors already kind of lined up, and it's very close. It's very scary.
No! You're gonna kill me!
But yeah, I think it'd be super interesting. I don't know, maybe I'll look a bit better. They'll doctor me off or something. Kate's just a better version of me. Yeah, it'll be really interesting.
It's going to be very cool. As far as, let's say, traditional acting versus video game acting, what were the differences? Was there a huge kind of difference between the two?
I'd say the main difference is just the speed at which you work when you're making a video game. You still have the same intention, and narratively it's the same kind of experience because you're creating characters together and you're creating a world together, and our wonderful director is like interacting with us as a film director would. And also you're on a stage where there's little square boxes and there isn't a costume, you know, that's something that's added later, and all that's being caught is the emotions on your face.
It must be quite intense when it's just focusing on your face. That must be a real, like, I don't know, like intense experience.
Although, to be honest, like the scripts they're really good, and so I don't really try and think about that too much, whatever the situation. I think if I did think about it, it would be an awful disaster.
Yeah, may change the situation entirely.
You just kind of listen to everybody else that's there and get on with it.
We need a plan. Forget his games, traps, all that bullshit. Think about the killers we've covered. There's always a weakness.
You suggesting we invite him to tea and psychoanalyze?
I'm suggesting we use our heads.
We play his games, we'll lose.
It's our best shot.
No i tak jak widzieliście, tutaj był cały ten wywiad z Jessie Buckley. Była tutaj ona pytana przez tą redaktorkę, jak jej się tam grało, czy w ogóle czy miała z tego jakąś przyjemność, mimo że nigdy nie brała udziału w żadnej grze wideo, tylko właśnie w serialach oraz filmach. Z tego co kojarzę, to Jessie Buckley została nagrodzona nominacją. Nie jest to zwycięstwo, ale nominacja też jest bardzo dobra. W filmie pod tytułem The Lost Daughter, no po polsku oczywiście córka, grała tam jakąś młodą ledę, z tego co kojarzę, ale najbardziej kojarzę ją z serialu Czarnobyl, z tego względu, że grała tam Ludmiłę Ignatienko, gdzie sama tam Ludmiła była jedną z takich niby denerwujących postaci, z tego względu, że po wybuchu w serialu była taka akcja, że po wybuchu oczywiście no jak było to promieniowanie, to jej grała rolę żony, męża, który był poszkodowany w całym tym Czarnobylu. No i mimo, że ona nie mogła tam wchodzić ze względu na promieniowanie, grała bardzo taką nierozsądną postać, ale no, żeby zagrać w takim naprawdę najpopularniejszym serialem od HBO, to jest naprawdę coś. Grała również w czwartym sezonie Fargo, ale jako kto? To nie mam pojęcia, ponieważ nie oglądałem jeszcze Fargo, ale mniejsza. Tutaj Jessie Buckley, mimo wszystko, że tutaj nigdy nie grała w żadnej grze komputerowej, nie dawała żadnego mock-upu, czyli właśnie tej technologii motion capture, to mimo wszystko naprawdę dobrze tutaj było odwzorowane. Ogólnie mimika twarzy Kate oraz Charlie'ego była bardzo dobrze dopracowana, moim zdaniem chyba najlepiej ze wszystkich. Bo Erin jeszcze miała taką fajną mimikę twarzy. Jednak no jakoś szczegółów twarzy u niej nie dopracowali, ale no szczerze to nie jest potrzebne. To zależy, czy macie tam jakieś też rysy twarzy, czy coś, czy w ogóle to trzeba jakoś uwzględniać i w ogóle. No i tutaj, jak w sumie każda inna aktorka powiedziała, aktorka z The Dark Pictures Anthology powiedziała, że dobrze się przy tym bawiła i było to dla niej naprawdę ciekawe doświadczenie. Więc nie wiadomo, możliwe, że Jessie Buckley jeszcze kiedyś zobaczymy w jakichś innych produkcjach. Nigdy nie wiadomo. Dobra, zacznijmy sobie teraz drugi materiał dodatkowy pod tytułem Pierwszy seryjny zabójca Ameryki.
Torture chambers, secret passageways, vats of acid, and deadly vaults. In 1895, Chicago police unearthed horrific evidence of torture and multiple murders at the sprawling castle of H.H. Holmes. Masquerading under the guise of caring doctor, kind husband, and prominent businessman, H.H. Holmes was a contemporary monster, designing his buildings solely for the disposal of human bodies. Torture doctor, monster of 63rd Street, H.H. Holmes was America's first serial killer. Just south of Chicago, the suburb of Englewood was thriving with commerce. The train station itself had 9 leading lines of railway and over 100 trains stopping there every day. No other suburb of Chicago had this luxury.
Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, a pleasure to meet you.
Arriving in Chicago, Holmes finds work immediately at the E.S. Holton drugstore, located at the southeast corner of 63rd and Wallace in Englewood. Several months later, Everett Holton dies of supposed natural causes. Then Claire Holton, his wife, disappears after selling the drugstore to Holmes. Owning the drugstore, Holmes had a steady flow of cash. He would often purchase and resell goods and properties under his numerous aliases. In addition to scamming creditors, Holmes obtained his funds from other phony inventions, such as a mineral water elixir, which in reality was obtained from the city's water supply.
Kto wymyślił białe napisy na białym tle?
Holmes secures a lease on the vacant property across the street from the drugstore, the southwest corner of 63rd and Wallace. It is here that Holmes will make his horrific dreams come true. He will construct a building for which the entire world will remember him.
Fantasies start very young, and so what he did then was he took a step furtherance of his fantasies to make it reality. And probably, if we had done a little bit of an investigation back then, we would have seen things like his plans, but not just plans for a building, because we'd expect to see architectural plans, but plans for his torture rooms.
For the suburb of Englewood, the building Holmes is erecting at 63rd and Wallace is a massive construction project. Day after day, passers-by stop to gaze at the spectacle of the many laborers working together to create a magnificent new edifice in their neighborhood. Englewood residents were so impressed with the massive building that they named it the Castle. From its outward appearance, it seemed rather normal. But like the duality of Holmes, the exterior and interior of the building were extremely different.
Holmes himself was the architect of the building. He was the only one who knew its design. There was this constant turnover of workers on the building. He would hire a mason to put in a wall and then fire the guy, or hire somebody to put in part of a staircase and then fire him. And there seemed to be several very sinister reasons behind that. One was he managed not to pay a lot of these people because he was always claiming that they were doing incompetent work. But the other, much more insidious reason was that no one except him really had a clear idea of what the structure of the interior of the house was. He had a huge bank vault installed in one of the rooms. And the way he did it was he put the vault in first while the building was under construction, and then built the room around it. And he bought this thing on credit and then refused to pay for it. The bank company said they were going to repossess the vault. Holmes said, well, you know, come on in and do, but if you damage my building in any way, I'm going to sue you for everything you're worth.
The bottom floor of the castle housed a pharmacy, jewelry store, barber shop, restaurant, and a blacksmith shop. Behind this innocent facade was a Gothic house of horrors designed by the mind of a monster. The third floor seemed innocent enough, containing rented rooms, legitimate offices, and Holmes's own bedroom. but it was the second floor that contained 35 rooms, many specifically designed as killing chambers. Disorienting unsuspecting victims, the labyrinthian construction contained numerous staircases and doorways that led nowhere. For a quick method of hiding a victim's body, a concealed greased chute and trapdoor led directly into the basement of the castle. The basement held the most terrifying rooms, resembling a medieval torture dungeon. Acid vats, quicklime pits, and a crematorium disguised as a glass-bending furnace were Holmes's favorite methods of immediate body disposal. After cleaning and mounting their bones, Holmes would profit from his victims by selling their skeletons to local medical schools and universities. Holmes would make a killing in Chicago, financially and literally.
To jest chore, że morderca sobie sprzedawał szkielety prawdziwych ludzi szkołom, żeby, wiecie, mogli pokazywać na przykład, gdzie jaka kość leży, czy tam do jakichś uniwersytetów zawsze używają takich szkieletów, na przykład jak idzie się na medycynę czy coś. Powalone.
Spanning 600 acres, sprawled out along beautiful Lake Michigan, the magnificent fair is a monumental sight to behold. Over 20 million people from around the world would attend the dazzling World's Fair between May 1st and October 30th, 1893. Holmes utilizes the World's Fair as the perfect opportunity to capitalize on his demented design of the castle. Located only a few miles from the World's Fair, Holmes's castle was perfect lodging for tourists. Holmes decides to rent rooms to visitors of the fair. He entirely renovates the upper floors of the castle, bringing in the most modern furnishings and luxuries, all purchased on credit, which Holmes had no intention of repaying. In addition to placing newspaper ads for rooms to rent, Holmes visited the fair with several of Benjamin Peitzel's children, preying on elderly women who flaunted their wealth, making sure he invited them back to the castle for a warm night's stay in a soft bed.
They're not calling their relatives, telling them where they're at. They just know that they're going to Chicago to see the Columbian Exposition. perfect victims because they're unknown in the city. Their relatives, wherever they came from, know that they were coming to Chicago, and they never came back. Now, how do you start to find them? They don't even know where they stayed. Perfect, easy victims. I'm sure some of them got in and out of his place with no problem. And others, they walked in and they never checked out.
Some of the rooms had been completely lined with asbestos to make them soundproof.
Hidden in Holmes's office was a master control panel which connected to gas lines leading into airtight sleeping chambers. Holmes would lead his victims into the rooms, lock them in, and turn on the gas, asphyxiating them while watching their demise.
Let me out! Holmes, let me out, please! Holmes! Holmes! Holmes, please! Holmes!
At the height of the World's Fair, Holmes masterfully juggles his castle businesses, renting rooms, dodging creditors, selling skeletons, and attending to the needs of the many women in his life.
I have had many young ladies in my employ, most of whom are still living in and about Chicago, whose parents and friends know only too well that far from being their seducer, I have done much to materially help them in their narrow lives.
Being a personable, attractive young doctor and businessman, Holmes won the hearts of many women throughout his life. At one point, Holmes managed to secretly have 3 wives, each never knowing of the others. In 1890, Julia Connor became Holmes's employee and mistress, living at the castle with her daughter Pearl. When she became pregnant and demanded marriage, Holmes agreed on the condition that she allowed him to perform an abortion on her. She agreed. Neither Julia nor her daughter Pearl were ever seen again. Just a week later, Holmes sold a clean, articulated skeleton to the Hahnemann Medical College for nearly $200. In 1892, Holmes acquired another mistress, Emmeline Sigrand, and employed her as private secretary. Holmes sent Emmeline into the vault to retrieve some papers and sealed it, suffocating her to death. Several weeks later, the University of Chicago acquired a female skeleton from Dr. Holmes. In 1893, Minnie Williams became Holmes's new private secretary and eventually his mistress. Minnie was the beneficiary of a property in Fort Worth, Texas, valued at over $40,000. Holmes murdered Minnie and her younger sister Nanny after having Minnie sign over the Fort Worth property to him. In 1894, Georgiana Yoke became Holmes's 3rd wife. He married her under the name Henry Mansfield Howard. Like his other legitimate wives, Georgiana lived out her entire life. On July 19, 1895, Chicago police enter the Holmes castle. The world would now learn of the horrors that the castle had kept secret for so very long. As disoriented detectives and police searched the upper floors of the castle, the true depths of Holmes's evil were waiting in the basement. Among the death devices in the basement of the castle, investigators find piles of mixed human and animal bones, bloody women's undergarments, and a wooden dissection table saturated with dried blood. Chicago police were inundated with names of people reported missing from the World's Fair. 50 missing people were eventually traced to the Castle of Horrors. The evidence, blood and bones found in the basement posed a problem for 19th century criminal investigative techniques.
It was very difficult to go and identify even the bones as being human in origin, because with the very small fragments you didn't have enough of the identifying characteristics to be able to make that ID.
The world is now calling Holmes the monster of 63rd Street, torture doctor, and the modern Bluebeard. Overnight, Holmes transforms from arch-swindler to arch-fiend. A Chicago journalist calls Holmes a multi-murderer.
The Holmes case generated this incredible amount of national attention and really international attention. Really in his own time and in America, Holmes was much more notorious and more widely known than Jack the Ripper, who was a contemporary of his. Then as now, people were very, very fascinated to sort of visit the sites of these terrible crimes. And his castle became a kind of tourist site. And there were various people who were wanted to take it over and turn it into a kind of murder museum. And then, just before some impresario was about to make it again into this tourist attraction, it burnt down. Somebody burnt it down. I mean, it could have been, who knows, some outraged citizen who didn't want this to become some very morbid tourist attraction. Holmes's trial was kind of the O.J. Simpson trial of the day. It just generated this huge amount of publicity. The case had become a kind of national obsession. Of course, there wasn't CNN or Court TV back then, so it couldn't be covered quite as relentlessly, but it was covered very, very extensively. There were true crime books and pamphlets and all kinds of stuff. And Holmes himself had become a sort of folk figure almost, you know, this sort of national boogeyman.
The courtroom fills for the final verdict to be read. Holmes becomes extremely nervous when not one of the jury members looks at him. In his entire criminal career, this is the moment Holmes never believed would occur. He is found guilty of murder in the first degree. Herman Webster Mudgett, alias H.H. Holmes, would be hanged on May 7th, 1896.
While Holmes was in jail, awaiting the execution of the sentence, he was made an offer by William Randolph Hearst, supposedly for a significant amount of money, to provide his confessions. Holmes, who had already issued at a half a dozen completely self-contradictory versions of his crimes, clearly at this point felt he had nothing to lose. He was going to die anyway. In this confession, he did a complete about-face and portrayed himself as the worst monster who ever lived. He just basically confessed to every crime anybody had ever suspected him of and threw in a few more for good measure.
He's reliving the fantasies after the fact now. He's reliving the fantasies of things that he did.
She was very willing to do this and prepared to leave the vault upon completing the letter, only to learn that the door would never again be opened until she had ceased to suffer the tortures of a slow and lingering death. The partial excavation in the walls of this room found by the police was caused by Latimer's endeavoring to escape by tearing away the solid brick and mortar with his unaided fingers. I closed the door and turned on both the oil and steam to their full extent. In a short time, not even the bones of my victim remained. It was the footprint of Nanny Williams that was found upon the painted surface of the vault door, made during her violent struggles before death. Only one difficulty presented itself. It was necessary for me to kill him in such a manner that no struggle or movement of his body should occur. I overcame this difficulty by first binding him hand and foot, and having done this, I proceeded to burn him alive by saturating his clothing and his face with benzene and igniting it with a match. As soon as he had ceased to breathe, I cut his body into pieces, and by the combined use of gas and corn cobs, proceeded to burn it with as little feeling as though it had been some inanimate object. I immediately took them to the Vincent Street house and compelled them to get within the large trunk, through the cover of which I had made a small opening and ended their lives by connecting the gas with the trunk. Then came the opening of the trunk and the viewing of their little blackened and distorted faces. Then the digging of their shallow graves in the basement of the house. The ruthless stripping off of their clothing and the burial without a particle of covering save the cold earth. I am convinced that since my imprisonment, I have changed woefully and gruesomely from what I was formerly in feature and figure. My features are assuming a pronounced satanical cast. My head and face are gradually assuming an elongated shape. I believe fully that I am growing to resemble the devil.
On the gallows, just before he died, he recanted. He claimed that the confession that he had published was a complete fabrication.
The extent of my wrongdoing in the taking of human life consists in contriving the killing of 2 women that have died at my hands as a result of criminal operations. That is all I have to say.
H. Holmes is hanged on Thursday, May 7th, 1896, just 9 days before his 35th birthday. At 10:25 a.m., he is pronounced dead.
He was very concerned that after his execution, his body would be dug up either by medical men seeking to dissect his brain and find out what made him tick, or just ghoulish sort of, souvenir hunters. And he requested that he be buried within a big slab of concrete, which he actually was. One of the things about Holmes is that nobody knows for sure how many people he actually killed. Although in my researches, which were pretty, I feel, thorough and extensive, it seemed very clear to me that he murdered at least 9 people. There have been stories that he killed 50, 100, countless people, particularly in Chicago at the height of the World's Fair.
How many people did Holmes actually murder? Most likely, no one will ever know. Holmes and the many other people that came in contact with him are long gone, having taken the answers with them to their graves.
I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer no more than the poet can help the inspiration to sing. I was born with the evil one standing as my sponsor beside the bed where I was ushered into the world. And he has been with me since.
Wow, John Borowski to robił, cały ten dokument. Polak. Ale polskich napisów dalej nie zrobią. Bo po co? Dobra, słuchajcie, tutaj tak w skrócie, to był chyba najdłuższy materiał dodatkowy z tych wszystkich. Making the Murder Castle wam pokażę prawdopodobnie w następnym odcinku. I dioramy jeszcze wam pokażę w następnym odcinku, ale Murder with Morello part 1 i 2 pokażę wam w ostatnim. Ewentualnie na odwrót, zobaczymy. Ale tak w skrócie, co do tego. Tutaj był właśnie taki dokument odnośnie H.H. Holmes'a. Na samym początku nazywał się on Herman Webster Mudgett. Tutaj od razu mogę też wam powiedzieć, że właśnie głównie Holmesa kręciły tutaj kobiety. Na samym początku miał ogólnie nawet 3 żony. Nie wiem, czy właśnie widzieliście, czy każdy zrozumiał ten dokument. Jeśli coś dla was było niejasne, napiszcie mi w komentarzu, przetłumaczę, wyjaśnię, wszystko wam powiem. No i tutaj oczywiście pierwsza żona zrobiła mu jednego syna, który nazywał się Robert. Jednak on zmarł. Nie wiadomo jak było. Możliwe, że też był właśnie jedną z ofiar H.H. Holmesa. Tak jak mówiono też pod koniec, nie wiadomo ile naprawdę H.H. Holmes zabił osób. Mówi się nawet, że do tych wszystkich zabójstw, które się przyznał, było ich 27. Pod sam koniec ogólnie, jak go wieszali, to przyznał się jeszcze do 2 morderstw, czyli właśnie przyznał się do morderstwa drugiej żony, która nazywała się Emmeline chyba? Czy tam Emily? I jeszcze do kogoś, do Julie Conner, która właśnie umarła podczas nieudanego zabiegu związanego z aborcją. Tutaj też to było wspomniane. Tutaj akurat też H.H. Holmes starał się unikać wszelakich, że tak powiem, opłat za budowę całego tego hotelu World's Fair. Jednak tutaj właśnie po odejściu drugiej żony podjął pracę w drogerii w Englewood. To też jest właśnie gdzieś na przedmieściach Chicago, czyli cały czas był, że tak powiem, w tym samym stanie. Co ja wam tu jeszcze mogę powiedzieć? Pracując tam w drogerii też Holmes zyskał tam 2 kochanki. No i przeprowadził też z poprzednią żoną rozwód z powodu jej niby niewierności. Holmes oczywiście później kupił plac, który był naprzeciwko tej drogerii i zaczął właśnie budować World's Fair Hotel na wzór zamku. Czyli właśnie, no, tak jak to było w całej grze opowiedziane. No i później oczywiście kochanki H.H. Holmesa też stały się, tak jak to chyba wcześniej mówiłem, ofiarami. No i oczywiście też H.H. Holmes przeprowadzał na nie testy. A jeśli chodzi... O właśnie, tutaj o takim, że tak powiem, nowym rozdziale w 1800, tak jakoś pod koniec, pod koniec XIX wieku, tak? XIX? Tak, XIX wiek. Było właśnie oblężenie turystów w związku z wystawą światową. Było to też oczywiście pokazane, ile było tam ludzi i w ogóle. No i oczywiście Holmes wynajmował tam pokoje w swoim domostwie, czyli właśnie w World's Fair Hotel, turystom, którzy tam przychodzili. No i oczywiście, nie wiem, czy kojarzycie osobę z podcastu, ale... Boże, z jakiego podcastu? Z prologu, który był na samym początku gry. To były właśnie jedne z tych ofiar. No i oczywiście później H.H. Holmes oczyszczał, że tak powiem, szkielet tych wszystkich ludzi, no i później sprzedawał je w Akademii Medycznej, której wcześniej studiował, żeby właśnie żeby się jednocześnie też tym zajmować. No ale jednak stwierdził, że chyba zabijanie tak będzie najlepszym pomysłem. No i oczywiście później H.H. Holmes ożenił się po raz trzeci z Georgianą. No i oczywiście później po zawarciu tego aktu małżeńskiego, nowo poślubiony małżonek został aresztowany za jakieś tam oszustwo. No i oczywiście kochająca, wielce kochana żona, już jego trzecia żona, stwierdziła, że po prostu jest niewinny, wpłaciła kaucję oraz go uwolniła. No i później oczywiście wiadomo, jaki los ją później czekał. Tutaj jeśli chodzi o samego H.H. Holmesa, to gdy sam Holmes prowadził interesy z jakimś tam typkiem, uknuli tam plan wyłudzenia z agencji ubezpieczeniowej dosyć sporej sumy pieniędzy właśnie na budowę tego domu. I wracając jeszcze o budowie tego domu, czekajcie. Mam to na końcu języka. O matko, no nie przypomnę sobie. Nie, chyba sobie nie przypomnę. Ale no, tak z grubsza. Chodzi po prostu o to, że jak H.H. Holmes zatrudniał tutaj robotników, żeby cokolwiek tutaj robili, to powiedzmy robotnik robił sobie schody, robotnik zrobił schody i H.H. Holmes go od razu zwolnił. Jednak właśnie nie wiem, czy tym pracownikom w ogóle zapłacono. No i każdy pracownik był tam po kolei zwalniany za coś tam. Pracownik zbudował, zwolnił. I już pracownik nie miał prawa w ogóle tam wracać z innej strony. Tak więc właśnie tak H.H. Holmes się wycwanił pod względem budowy tego hotelu. No naprawdę ciekawie. I wracając. Wracając jeszcze do tego, jak zatrzymali Holmesa. Czekajcie, ile w ogóle mam nagrania? Matko, 50 minut. Ale dobra. Tutaj jak złapano Holmesa, to w taki sposób, że policja w Filadelfii znalazła pana Perry'ego, który zginął wskutek nieszczęśliwego wypadku, który był spowodowanym wybuchem kwasów i innych tam chemikaliów. Tą sprawę zamknięto, gdy dobra. Nieważne. Wracając. Później się okazało, że te wszystkie chemikalia pochodziły od właśnie pana Holmesa. No i oczywiście policja zaczęła węszyć i w końcu zeszli tam do jego piwnicy. No i tam była po prostu istna masakra. Było tam laboratorium, gdzie on właśnie miał te wszystkie szkielety i niektóre jeszcze ciała. I wracając jeszcze, znaczy już w sumie kończąc na tym wyroku H.H. Holmesa, tak jak w sumie mówiono to w grze, że przyznał się do popełnienia 27 morderstw oraz zabójstw, mimo że zarzucano mu ich aż ponad 100. Tak więc to jest tylko taki zalążek, który jest zapewniony wszystkimi dowodami. Na inne morderstwa nie znaleziono dowodów, ale można było się domyślić, że on to zrobił, ponieważ te osoby przed samą śmiercią miały właśnie z nim związek. Tak więc no. A szczerze, większość ich ofiar to były kobiety. Ewentualnie napatoczeni się mężowie. Tak jak to było w prologu, ale czy tak było w rzeczywistości, to nie mam pojęcia. I tak jak właśnie mówili to w grze, że właśnie się przyznał do tych 27 zabójstw oraz i do 6 usiłowań zabójstw. No i później po jakimś czasie odwołał swoje zeznania, twierdząc, że był opętany przez diabła czy tam szatana, czyli jak sam tytuł mówi, The Devil in Me. No i oczywiście, to też było wspomniane w grze, ale i tak wolę powiedzieć, ostatnią wolą H.H. Holmesa było to, żeby trumnę z jego zwłokami zalono betonem, ponieważ bał się bardzo, że ktoś będzie chciał wyciągnąć w przyszłości lub od razu po jego śmierci jego mózg i żeby go przebadali. Z tego co kojarzę, z mózgiem Dahmera było tak samo. Jeffrey Dahmer, możecie na pewno kojarzyć serial na Netflixie, który nazywa się Potwór, czyli historia Jeffreya Dahmera. Tutaj akurat też to był jeden z morderców, tylko że on akurat nie, tak jakby nie konserwował tych zwłok i w ogóle tylko je zjadał. Ćwiartował i zjadał. Wiecie, jak można teraz oszczędzić na mięsie, nie? No, taki protip. Dobra, wracając. Prośbę tą oczywiście spełniono. No i właśnie to ja wam mówiłem, przed śmiercią przyznał się do jeszcze 2 nieumyślnych spowodowań śmierci. Tak więc widzę, że tutaj już nawet czas mnie goni, bo nawet wyskoczył ten licznik, ile już nagrywam i że zaraz się skończy nagranie. Tak więc słuchajcie, z tych materiałów dodatkowych byłoby na tyle. Mam nadzieję, że te materiały dodatkowe wam się spodobały. W następnym odcinku bierzemy się za Making the Murder Castle i dioramy, ewentualnie Murder with Morello, part 1 oraz part 2. Tak więc na razie i cześć, do zobaczenia w następnym odcinku z The Dark Pictures Anthology The Devil in Me.